Welcome back to episode 39 of First Principles. A few weeks ago, you heard the first part of my conversation with Aneesh Reddy, the CEO and co founder of Capillary Tech, a software company offering products and services in the customer experience space. And you might remember that in that episode, Anish took me through the journey of Capillary in installments because, as he explained, Anish dreams in installments. The second installment were the years 2013 to 2018, which Anish called Capillary's confusing years. They were particularly difficult years for them. Having raised a massive amount of venture funding at an expensive valuation, Capillary started burning cash as they expanded ambitiously beyond India. The leadership had to justify the valuation, Anish said. The 5 years were an installment of success and excess. During this time, Anish's co founder Krishna Mehra, or KK, had moved to San Francisco in the US. Communication between the co founders started breaking down even as the pressure on Capillary started mounting. Eventually, both of Anish's co founders left within months of each other. But before leaving, KK was upfront with Anish.
And he felt that I'd kind of become a bully. I think KK at least half of it he left for the fact that I think I was not workable with him at that point in time.
Anish went to the Capillary board and told them he wanted to quit. In the first part of my conversation with Anish, you heard this story. And in this second part, you'll hear the two things that Anish ended up doing to bounce back. The first was executive coaching.
And I was a hard nut to crack. So I think my exec coach had to take that extra effort to really say, no. People have actually said this about you. Right? So it was pretty bad. So halfway through the process, I was like, I didn't sign up for all this.
Eventually, the coaching process proved to be so transformative for Anish that Capillary today offers executive coaching to not just its entire leadership team, but also all the way down to first-time managers. The second, very interestingly, was Vipassana. It's a kind of meditation where you're asked to observe yourself, your breathing, the sensations on your body, your thoughts. Anish attended a 10-day Vipassana camp on the recommendation of a friend. For 10 days, you're allowed no distractions. You can't bring devices, any books, or even a piece of paper. You're not even allowed to talk to anyone. And as Anish explained, it was very difficult at first. But it changed him.
I think if you're an entrepreneur, I think entrepreneurship is I've been very lucky as an entrepreneur, right? I think it's a journey of self-discovery and self-purification more than anything else. Especially if you run something for 15 years, I think there's no way you wouldn't have gone through bad cycles or tough times. And a Vipassana in the middle, I think, just accelerates that process of self-discovery and purification a lot more.
Again, Anish drew so much from this process that employees of Capillary are allowed to go on a 10-day or 11-day Vipassana camp over and above their annual paid leave. In this episode, Anish talks to me about how these two interventions transformed him and Capillary. He takes me through both processes, day by day in case of Vipassana, and how it made a difference to his temperament, leadership style, and his approach to managing. We also talk about Anish's fitness journey, finding a purpose in work, and the future of Capillary. I think this episode might be one of the most reflective and in-depth conversations I've had on First Principles. I can't wait for you to hear it. Let's get into it. Anish, I'm going to take you back to the part earlier where your co-founders left. I think KK called you a bully. I think around that time, if I'm not mistaken, you also went to the board and said, that's it, I'm done. I want to quit. And your board members said, I think you said it was Venkat, who said, no, relax. You need some executive coaching.
Yep.
Take us back to that. Tell us about, I'm sure at that point you would have never explicitly or consciously have thought of executive coaching. Few founders have, especially if they've kind of grown businesses through the trenches themselves, right? What was your initial reaction, and what was the journey subsequently for you?
Obviously, it came at a point when I was very surprised, right? That someone, and KK was a wingmate of mine back on campus, right? So we
So the relationship,
knew
friendship
each other
stretched
for
back,
10
yeah.
years plus, and we'd done many things together. Capillary was not necessarily our first startup. I mean, the eCell was our first startup between him and me. Capillary was the second, right? So that coming from him obviously shook me up. And when a co-founder is leaving in a super overvalued company, it is a different ball game altogether, right? So you'll have miffed investors, you'll have people who will feel that they've been taken for a ride. You'll have all that going on the side as well, right? And we had all of that, obviously, right? And
And when was it that your second co-founder also left, or was it around this time or
they
later?
left between about 2-3 months of each other.
Yeah.
So it was not
So
like
I can imagine the investor pressure on you. And even if the investors didn't transmit that pressure, you as a founder would kind of imagine up that pressure, right? This is what they must be thinking of me, etc. and stuff like that. But again, like,
yeah.
back to you.
Yeah, I mean, look, and KK was also a brilliant guy, right? So the company always had two faces. It was KK and me. And in fact, even if you look at the fundraise, we raised from two. KK managed one, I would manage the other. So, right, so when KK decided to move, this other obviously felt that, look, oh God, what's happening here? Right? So it was just so when, and then obviously, so I did get beaten up a little bit, both by myself and people around on saying, dude, kya kar rahe ho? Right? So when Venkat suggested this exec coaching thing, I was like, yeah, for sure. I think you need to be vulnerable at the point when you get into a exec coaching engagement. If, it's like this, right? I think most founders have like 3 layers outside and deep inside as this secure, lonely founder, right? Actually, I'm just quoting something that someone's told me here. Right? So, and so you need to be vulnerable to let that guy inside come out, right? And
Those 3 shields should have been cracked to some extent for you to feel that I need help.
very large extent, right? So, and the exec coaching process, especially if you get a good coach, is kind of like they break you down before they build you back. So they do a 360, and you'll hear all kinds of stuff being spoken about you. And I was a hard nut to crack. So I think my exec coach had to take that extra effort to really say, no. People have actually said this about you, right? So it was pretty bad. So halfway through the process, I was like, I didn't sign up for all this, right? So luckily, I think as I mean, I went to the Coaching Foundation of India for my coaching, and he had broken this problem down to me, saying only 3 behaviors to change, and in those 3 behaviors, here are the 5 things you will do. Right? So, like the bully thing was basically saying, let people speak first. You be the last to speak in a meeting. Simple rule, right? So when you're getting into a meeting, you're not going to start that meeting with saying, here is what we should do. Right? The way to do it is let everyone speak. At the end, you give your views, that is still fine. But, so stuff like that, right? So very simple. So I think the process was a easy one, right? So once I believed that, look, yeah, this is all people who are my close friends. There's no politics here. And they are telling me that, look, you need to change. Here are the things. So I think there was enough of acceptance on saying, I need to change. And once there is acceptance, I think the exec coaching process works. Right? So, and we've now, we have a very active exec coaching thing in Capillary. Like all the leadership team goes to ALI, the Asian Leadership Institute. They're really good. Then everyone who's a first-time manager gets a coach, like a proper exec coach from outside. So I think we've at least had 50, 60 people go through coaching as a...
How long has this been going on?
I think almost for the last 4-5 years now. Even through COVID, we didn't cut the exec coaching
And this must be
program.
a significant expense.
So we've now found coaches who don't charge us a lot, right? So it's almost like, the exec coaching, of course. I mean, the ALI thing is expensive. It's not, which is why it's restricted to only the top leadership team, right? Like 10, 12 people at max. Then we have the LT-1 and all first-time managers, right? Which any year will be like 30, 40 people. So it'll be about a crore and a half of expense in a year.
Got it.
But it's very worth it because then people stay with you for that much longer. And I think it's a no-brainer investment.
Why do you think exec coaching helps so much?
Yeah, I think...
And the context for that is, in organizations where it does not exist, you would assume that, hey, your manager or your peers or your HR, etc., are filling in to provide the mentorship, guidance, etc., that's required for you to grow and excel, right? Now, as opposed to another organization where there is this other individual who's not from your organization, but who's working with you to make it better. Why do you think this works better?
I think first is the neutrality, right? I mean, if I were to get, let's say the HR example you gave, right? Usually what would happen, someone would have said something about you and then HR would have got involved and said, I want to do a 360 for you, right? And now you're anyway, as an employee, getting into that situation with saying biased HR, they have knock that off by saying, look, meet 10 people, you choose your exec coach. You go pick someone with whom you have chemistry, right? And that guy's only intent here is to make you a better person. And as a process, as a net outcome of that, also make Capillary better, right? So I think the start point is very different, right? The second thing I've realized is at least the exec coaches we have are all trained senior folks, and they follow a process. There's a method to that madness, which I have not seen in your manager is never going to be can never be your exec coach. Some might be, but there is a deep method and madness to this, right? I mean, and it's a lot of work. I mean, it's not yeah. So I at least, and even in spite of all this, I think we've seen exec coaching work in 80% of the cases. We've not seen it work in 20.
Got it.
And usually the thing is the individual vulnerable or not? Right.
All right. I think earlier you were talking about the three things that your exec coach told you, right? The first one was like resolving the bully behavior by letting others speak. What were the other two? Were they confidential or?
Yeah, I actually don't remember them now. I've
All right.
written
So let me
somewhere,
ask this
but,
question differently.
I've actually had another. I think you should go. I did another exec coaching engagement again in 2021. I think it's a good idea to do it every 6, 7, 8 years or 4, 5 years, right? Because this time, of course, there was no bully behavior and such type stuff, but there was still stuff which, I think are worth working on.
So you personally do it as an interventional thing every few years, not as an ongoing thing?
Yeah, not as an ongoing thing. Yeah. So it's not a business coach. It is more
I get that.
a behavior coach and a leadership
Personal
coach.
growth, personal leadership growth.
Correct.
What was your lead? How would you define your leadership style before you did your first executive coaching intervention and after?
I think before, So I've been, I'm generally been, I've been lucky to have a very fast mind, which is what a lot of people around me at least say.
What your dad told you as well, right?
Yeah. So the earlier me would be this, arrive at a conclusion very quickly and tell people that do this. Abhi karo,
It's also
right?
the engineering mindset, right? The solution, what's the quickest path to an efficient solution, right? Anything else is a waste of time.
I think today, I think that's changed quite a bit to, you still get to the solution. You can't stop your mind, right? So you still get to the solution. But I think the approach now has been to say, ask questions which help them get to the same solution or get to a better solution, right? So that's the change. That's the piece of saying, go last in a meeting, right? Don't be the first to talk in a meeting. Be the last.
Especially as a founder, if you're the first one to speak in a meeting, it A biases everyone towards your solution, and B at especially in startups and organizations, they're like, why
Absolutely.
should I speak? The solution is already known, and
Absolutely. And the second is, I think culturally now, a lot of the org knows that you can say no to Anish and, it'll still be fine, right? And I think we also have this very open culture of talking about failures, so, and, so when folks know that, okay, there is acceptance on failures on his part, then they'll be that much open about saying, I think you're thinking wrong about this. And, or pointing to you and saying you did the same thing 3 years ago and it got messed up, right? So
sticking with the same theme, how have you changed in the way you manage people?
right, I think till 2013 14, right? So look, I before that I was a manager at ITC as well, but I used to run maintenance at a cigarette factory. Very different, right? The team that reported to me was a unionized team, so very different from managing, high quality talent and stuff like that. Uh, the other thing that we started in 2013 14 was, till then I would never do these one-on-ones because you were living in the same house, so what one-on-one, right? So you will just chat wherever you're going, you're only talking business anyways. So now I think I have a far more this was the learning from the three founders staying in three different parts of the world, right? That one-on-ones are extremely critical. And this one-on-one is not this random call you just said कि ये solve कर दो मेरे लिए, but like a slotted half an hour, 40 minutes in your calendar every week, where you actually have
Present.
where you're present, where you have a clean agenda saying, look, where can I help, where can I not? It's not your 10-minute chat to fix a problem, right? And in fact now, in the last exec coaching engagement, I now have a format of how to run each one-on-one. Once a quarter, it's run very differently from the every week one. So some of that structure, I think, has really helped. We in fact now have a very formal skip level process in the company as well, where I do about 60-65 skip levels every 6 months. So again, very set. I think some of that I think as a management style helps because then, you're not taking things for granted that things are not getting communicated, right? So, or people will come to you, right? When you have some of this, I think that's been one. I think we've always been a culture of care, right? So that's not changed, whether it was before or now.
Is there anything that you changed your mind about when it comes to managing people?
I do think, I am an impatient guy. So I would have this thing of following up. I think it's a very common founder thing also. Right? You tend to follow up a lot. I think over the last 5-6 years, I've brought that down to saying I will follow up only in the one-on-one. So I on my phone I have a list of things. Whenever I feel like following up, I add a item to that individual's name saying, when I meet him next, let's follow up. Let's not call him now, right? Because what happens is when you call up someone out of the middle, they change their priority order for you. It just messes the whole thing up, right? So that's one change, like basically taking care of my own follow-up thing in a more structured, organized way. The second is this, that I think, again, coming to the impatience, there was this big belief that get everything done this quarter, right? And I think thankfully that's not the case with me now. I think I've really run the company into very wrong places by trying to do many things at the same time. I do think building something best in class, building something good takes time, right? So spreading things out over a period of time. That's the other change. I think from being the guy who would say, let's do all the 10 things that are on the sheet to saying, no, pick two and pushing that down. I think that's the change in leadership styles as well, that there is value in doing less and doing it well. Yeah, I'd say these two are the big changes, if you really ask me, over the last 5-10 years.
Vipassana is a big thing for you, and you said earlier that you encourage employees to take, uh, you give them extra leave if they want to take like a 10-day, 11-day Vipassana break as well. Take us through, I mean, what was your first Vipassana like? 2020, right? I
Right.
mean, you went into it in a very stressed mindset, but what were the first, what was it, 11 days? 10
Yeah,
days?
it's 10
Usually it's what,
days, 1
yeah.
plus 10
All
plus
right.
1, right? So
Right. So what were those 10 days like?
so I think I was 35 when I did my first Vipassana. So, and by 35, especially if you've been meaningfully successful, right? Your mind has built its own habit patterns, right? I mean, it will judge a few things. It will, uh, it'll react a certain way to a certain things, right? So, and I had some of these very constant habit patterns, right? A lot of negativity on where I had got capillary to. Some things on the personal side, like I have always had a very angry relationship with my mother, and I think it's very common. Most people have a very angry relationship with their mother, but and she's also this high follow up. Always wants to be in control. Lady, right? I mean, so things like that, right? So there would be a few things which were definite landmines, right? So the third thing was this, which was for a long time, I think in that 2013 to 18 time frame, you would see people raising these billions of dollars, this, and it would hit you, right? I mean, it takes you. I think now I don't care actually, but at that point in time, it would hit you, right? So there were some of these very standard patterns that you would, uh, like things like when a senior employee left, or there were 5 or 6 or 7 trigger points, which one of those happened, then you would have your set way of going through the rest of it, right? Which would just be a lot of suffering, a lot of pain, a lot of blame, a lot of shouting, all that stuff, right? So, so what happens in a vipassana is essentially you're trying to uncondition yourselves from all these conditionings, right? So the first 3 days, 3.5 days, you basically just look at your breath. So you sit for cross-legged on a cushion for roughly 10 hours a day. Starts in the morning at 4:30 and till the evening 9. And it's 1 hour slots, right? So you sit for 10 hours a day, right? So the first 3.5 days is just breath, right? So all you're trying to do is stop your mind from wandering, right? So if
By focusing on the breath.
yeah, so basically try and break those habit patterns, right? So the
And
first
how
time,
hard was it?
yeah, I think I'd lie if I said that it was very easy. It was hard, obviously. I think like sitting cross-legged, you don't talk to anyone, which I think is the easiest part there. Most people freak out when you say that 10 days you can't talk to anyone, but the easiest part of the Vipassana is not talking to anyone, right? I think what also happens is, look, you've never given yourselves 10 days with yourself, right? So a lot of your extremely deep, like if you're in a meeting and this thought of, your missed capillary comes up, in another 5 minutes, someone's going to say something, you want to reply, you're done, right? So this thought is gone. But here you're sitting with that thought for that full hour. Unless you get to that moment when you pull yourselves back and say, I was not supposed to think about that. I'm supposed to be like looking at my
Focusing
breath.
on the breath. That's
Right. So it is hard, right? I mean, I've seen, I mean, even I've had my own moments when I broke down, right? So I've seen people in the room break down as well. It is hard, right? So it's definitely not. But the good piece is, look, at the end of the 3.5, 4 days, you I think get to a 50-60% cleaner mind, right? Because the same anxieties you have, or the same worries you have, or the same thought patterns you have, they would have diminished like greatly, because they would have come to you 100 times, and then after some time you would have gone back to your breath on each of those 100 times, right? So essentially making that weak in some senses, right? So then the next 3-4 days, you're supposed to look at sensations on your body, right? So And I think by the fifth or sixth day, your knees are going to be in like 10x the pain, right? Because you're not habituated to sitting cross-legged. And somewhere on the day four, they introduced this thing of don't move for an hour, 3 times a day. The full hour, don't move. Till then, you can move, you can do whatever you want to do, right? And so essentially, what you're being accustomed to is to say that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, right? So you're kind of trying to build this resilience to saying, look, I mean, you don't control what's being thrown
To
at you by
stimuli,
life.
yeah.
You don't control what's being thrown to you by life or even your own thoughts, right? I mean, you don't control your own thoughts. So that was the other thing. So the next 3 days was really this building resistance to pain. So I think somewhere on the eighth day, I could actually need to sit for an hour without moving. I think I ended up sitting for an hour and a half. Right? So I think it's and then you have this discourse every evening, where in a very self-deprecating way. I mean, self-deprecating as in, SN Goenka, whose videos are played and gives the instructions. In a very self-deprecating way, he will talk about things which you will associate with. Self-deprecating for him, not for you. But I think that's a good way to also realize that, look, I think it was transformative, right? Those 10 days was, I thought I was amazed at how much I changed in those 10 days. The first thing I did was I called my Anant up and said, look, I think we should make this open to everyone. And his first reaction was, I don't think anything has changed. You still have come back with these ideas. And then finally he went for a Vipassana like 6-7 months later. He came back and said, yeah, I think we should
I
make
agree.
it for everyone.
All
But
right.
it is I think if you're an entrepreneur, I think entrepreneurship is I've been very lucky as an entrepreneur, right? I think it's a journey of self-discovery and self-purification more than anything else. Especially if you run something for 15 years, I think there's no way you wouldn't have gone through bad cycles or tough times. And I think it is a journey of self-discovery and self-purification, right? So, and a Vipassana in the middle, I think just accelerates that process of self-discovery and purification a lot more. Yeah.
You said earlier that, beyond a certain amount of wealth, it really makes no difference. And you've gone through your own ups and downs as well. So today, what really drives you to wake up every day, to come to work every week, to continue to strive? What drives you?
I think even when we started, right? When we started these billion-dollar valuations, all this was not there, right? So it was 2008. And the people you looked up to was the Narayan Murthis, right? Extremely simply dressed and very high principles and infi-like cultures, right? So the start point of Capillary was also always saying, let's build a great organization. A good culture organization, I think, was far more than the side of... so that is still something I think we are on a journey of, right? So I do think, like in Capillary, we one stated goal for the company, like our purpose statement is we are here to help brands build delightful experiences with their customers and to help our team build like meaningful lives, right? So by meaningful, I mean, this whole Vipassana experience for me was saying, look, there are more dimensions to life than just money, right? And happiness has definitely got to do a lot more with you, with what you're inside and what you're feeling inside, than what's happening outside, right? So in Capillary, we now have a inner peace initiative where about 100 folks have done a one-day retreat, which either I run or Anant runs or Funny from Red Bus. We're experimenting with stuff. We do believe that companies need not be only about your job and about the money you make. I think it can be a lot more holistic in that sense. So that's the org part, right? I definitely think there is a lot more figuring to do on that part, and we spend significant time on that side. That keeps me driven. That look, I think this is an unsolved problem which very few orgs have looked at that way, right? The second, of course, I think is I've been told so many times that you can't build product companies out of India. that there is this thing in me or
Chip
in
on the
the
shoulder
company
that
to say,
without-
look, we have to go out and build the best product company in our space. And that's a few things, right? I mean, that's beyond just the best product. It's also about having the best companies in the world work for you. Do you have a significant share of the Fortune 500, for example? Do all analysts, do everyone say that, look, this is the best product? So a bunch of that stuff, right? So that's the other thing that keeps us, motivated. Yeah.
Do you have any favorite mental models? Do you tend to use a lot of mental models in your decision making, or what's your management style when it comes to decision making?
I think a few mental models, yes. Obviously, I think context is king, is the first, right? So I think you could be very smart about your decisions, or you could have very smart people taking decisions, but if they don't have the right context, then it's not going to work, right? So luckily in Capillary, we've had people stay for a long. In fact, now I have this mental model that if someone's not been in the company for the real value add of people actually starts in year 3. So I really don't know how startups with 2-year life cycles of employees can build great businesses for the future, right? Because until you've made some mistakes, you've been through the hard times together, I don't think the bonding happens in a business, right? So the next time you actually want to go through a hard time, you will have all the folks who have not seen this forming happen really stay with you, right? So this context piece. So before we decide anything, I think we do take a lot of time on figuring context, which is speaking to internally, externally, anything we do now, I speak to another 10 startups saying, guys, what did you guys do? Which situation were you in at that point in time as well, right? So the other mental model is, of course, that this Vipassana thing is, of course, put me on a different journey of spirituality and some of that. Purpose has been one question I've always asked myself, right? So whether it was ITC, whether it was MIT, any of those calls always had this question of, what's your purpose in life in some senses? And I think one mental model that's there now comes from a little bit of Advaita, a little bit of Buddhism is, I think what has to happen is going to happen, right? The way we have got here, the only way we could have got here is the way it happened, right? So don't stress out too much about, when things go bad, we tend to really blame ourselves or blame something on it. I sometimes feel that we miss the bigger picture of why that might have happened. For example, if COVID didn't happen, if we didn't go through all the mess that we did between 2013 to 18 or 19, I don't think we would have reinvented ourselves and got to this place, right? So I do believe till that point, I think I was a reasonable atheist. Right now, I think I'm a believer more than anything else, that I think the universe conspires to do the right thing for you, but it need not be that it's going to be good for you. They're going to be local minimas, which then lead to global maximas, right? So I think that's a thought point as well. That if something doesn't go well,
How do you balance this while also being CEO of a company and you're setting goals and ambitious growth targets, etc., and stuff like that? Because at some level, this is what has to happen will happen, must be balanced with, but we had set out to do this, and why has this not happened? So, when your employees, when your peers come to you, etc., and stuff like that, I'm sure there is sometimes a stress, right? You can't always just say,
So I think focus on stuff that you can control, right? Focus on the inputs, focus on, is that individual doing the right things, right? If it's about hitting a goal or something.
Is Capillary a inputs driven organization or an output / goals metrics driven organization?
We are of course, you can't run an org without output metrics and stuff. But under every output metric, you have 5 inputs. So, and life is such, right? You can hit all those 5 input metrics and still the output might be whatever it is. So you when you do OKRs, you obviously go
So you
metrics
run on
like
OKRs?
yeah, we
Or
run on
was this
OKRs.
part of the X to 10X intervention as well?
Yeah, it was part of the X10X intervention. We I wouldn't say I don't think we did OKRs the OKR way earlier. You would have goals and stuff, but yeah. So you do have metrics, you do have numbers which people can look at, but what you judge people on is inputs more than outputs, right? Because I think inputs are in your control, right? So
How long have you been running OKRs?
about 4 years now.
And what's your from the first year to now, what's been the, I mean, if you had to distill down some of the learnings on running a successful OKR program, what would they be?
Yeah, I think it helps a lot with aligning the company on we use the X10X tool as well. So they can actually anyone can look at what the goals for the company and how it drills down, right? So it helps with that part because and everyone's aligned on saying here are the four big rocks for the company for this year, right? So I think earlier when we did OKRs, it was not as top down. It was a little bit of okay, what are you doing? We'll put your OKR in, that kind of stuff. I think especially in a startup, right? If again going back to the question of how are you adding value to the bigger picture, right? Most people like to work in startups for the purpose, for the value they are adding, for the culture, some of that. I think it gets solved pretty nicely. I would struggle for many years with this question of how do you align like 500 people to like say here's a clean way, right? Every time they log into the tool, they can see that here are the 5 things you want to do this year.
Got it. Is there anything that you're paranoid about?
Good question. Yes, there are. Again, I think, this question of purpose keeps haunting me, right? So, haunting is a bad word. But I don't know, like, what is the eventual purpose of life? Is a question which, I don't think I've found an answer to. Yeah, I mean, I do read up a lot, so there's the last year and a half has been a lot of Advaita and a lot of Buddhism. But again, the question of, I think a company can have, like, what is the purpose of life? And especially, and the answer I'm looking for is a non-transient answer, right? Sometimes you have purposes which, let's say it's your first job is to say, I'll get to financial independence and then, whatever, right? So, but yeah, I think that's a question that that I'm kind of paranoid about. That look, what is the answer to this and what's the path to it? Yeah.
Right. Switching to a bit of personal questions, I think you said somewhere that you were a couch potato till 2013. What changed after that?
I think, so till 2008 to ITC was also a fairly high stress job, right? I was running maintenance for a cigarette factory. It used to be a high stress job. So it was not like I had a lot of time, right? So till 2006 to pre-2006, you were anywhere at IIT. Quality of food at IIT is I don't need to talk about it. So 2006 to I think 12 was years when, you would live on one meal a day. Right? I mean, not because you couldn't eat the other meal, but you were just so busy with stuff, right? And it usually would be you would have a beer for dinner and then you'd have some food and then you're like done and then the next day starts, right? I got married in 2012. And then I went from 72 kilos to like 90 kilos in about 18 months. Right?
You're just not used to eating food.
So I would come home or I would get, I'd come home and then there'd be amazing food at home, one. Two, I would get a lunchbox home. And then, it was just, and whatever, right? You eat ice creams, this, that. So I'd suddenly gone from this not lean, but let's say like okay built guy, 72 kilos to like 90, right? So, and I think it was early 2014 when we went out for a friend's bachelor's to Bali, and we were trying to surf. Bali has these, and for my life, I couldn't stand up on that damn thing. I realized that look, this is like too much, and the same thing was happening with everyone around me as well, because we were all folks who were kind of getting married around the same time. We were all putting on it. I think marriage is one point when you start putting on weight after, right? So we then started a running club in Capillary. We would all head to Coburn every Sunday morning. That switched the thing for me. And again, running is also very meditative, right? I mean, I don't run now, but
Why do you stop?
yeah, what happened was when you're running, you also need to make sure you hit the gym and all that stuff, right? So
Also,
I did a lot of running.
Limited amount of time to do extra. Is that what it is?
Is
Or
it?
you're saying running burns calories, so you need to like put on muscle?
No.
Which one?
No. What happened with me was I injured my knees a little too bad,
Got it.
right? So it was like, so from 2014 to 2017, 18, I think I don't know, I did some 20 half marathons and like it was just crazy, right? So, and I
It's also a
love
very
running.
founder thing, right? Like, you chance upon something and
And
then you
you just
over-index
overdo
on
it.
it, right?
Yeah.
It's
The very
either there
founder
is this
thing.
joke that like either it's set to off or it's set to max. There's nothing in the middle.
Exactly. So I hurt my knees, and then it started hurting my back, and so then the doctor basically said, "Look, I think your running days are over. Start yoga." So I do an hour of yoga every morning, right? So that's replaced the running, and then an hour of vipassana. So 2 hours is like a lot of time to spend on yourself every day. Yeah, but so the couch potato thing changed hands. It was just super overweight, and everyone else around was also.
So it went from overweight to running and now to yoga and vipassana. That's your fitness routine now?
Yeah, an hour of yoga every morning and an hour of vipassana is at least 6 days a week, let's say.
You also use the analogy of running a startup to being like running a marathon.
Yep, it is actually, right? If you think about it, there I
Which is
think
both taxing physically as well as mentally, because you also talked about running is a mental activity as well, right? So do you want to tell us about that analogy of running and like, running a startup as well?
yeah, I think especially when you're a 22-year-old starting up, you really run like it's like a sprint, right?
All out.
It's like a sprint, like all out, right? So, and then that leads to a lot of burnout, like I mentioned, and stuff, right? So again, when you're prepping for a marathon, the first thing you do is you're told not to run too fast, right? So I think some of that applies very well to a startup as well. If you think about it, like
If someone told you back when you were starting up that, look, you'll be doing this for the next 20 years,
I would probably build it very differently, right? In fact, that's when we opened the US as a market, or now we're opening Europe. My approach has been that saying this is a 10-year build, I'm going to take my time, right? So frustrates key employees that you hire sometimes saying like, what kind of a guy is this? He doesn't want things moving fast, but that's the right way to build, I feel, right? So even in running, right? In fact, I joined the Jayanagar Jaguars, which is a running club. I don't know if you heard of them. And they break it down nicely for you, right? So there is a certain 180 beats per minute 180 beats per minute
that's the zone.
is typically the pace at which you have least injuries, at which you're most optimally, burning energy, etc. Right? Some of that stuff, even in startups, if you look at the startup equivalent for it, you never think of it that way, right? Like you never like this back end knee injury thing. If I had asked around saying, look, should I do it? Should I like go to the gym? I'm sure people have said, you have to do both if you're overrunning so much. In startups, again, you don't do that usually. How many times do you actually go out and are vulnerable with another founder and say that, look, I'm trying to build this, but I'm messing it up? Lots of parallels. I feel, and running is, especially long runs, are extremely meditative, right? So
Because you're alone with yourself and your own
you're
mind.
alone with yourselves, and because I was trying to get to this 180 beats per minute rhythm, instead of playing music, I would just play something that gives me the beats. So I just had to, and so that also like really calms you down, like because your mind is just focused.
It's almost like the equivalent of focusing on your breath, right? Because you're
Correct.
focusing on those constant beats.
Correct. So yeah, no, I think being physically and mentally fit, I think definitely adds a lot of value to your startup.
What does personal time for you look like?
Personal as in family or personal?
I mean, I'll let you answer it the way you feel comfortable.
So I do my vipassanas, right? So there's someone who gave me this um, four buckets you should look at life, right? So one was professional, personal, spiritual, and family, right? So I try and do a good, like every
Well,
year.
we get professional, we get spiritual, we get family. What's personal?
Personal is, I think like for me, like an hour or two a day is what I really try to keep for personal, right? So I get up in the morning at 4:30. 5 to 6 is an hour of vipassana. 6 to 7 is yoga. Our yoga instructor comes in, so 6 to 7 is yoga. And then typically off late, I try and read a book in the morning, like 7 to. The kids are gone to school by like the school bus comes at 6:30, so they're gone, right?
How
So
old are your kids?
7 and 10, right? So yeah, so you get done by I'd say like read an hour of books, 8, 9, something like that. Because we have a large US business now, I've kind of changed my work timings around a little bit, right? And I think some of this is consciously doing it helps. I get to office only by 10 and I get out of office at 3. Right? So again, 3 to 6 is time with the
How
kids.
far
And
is your
family.
office from home?
15 minutes.
Ah.
HSR and Harlow Road. So 3 to 6 is again time with kids and family. Because what I was realizing was my son is 10 now. Another 2 years he'll be gone. Right. So 3 I head back home.
Sorry, why will he be gone?
He'll be gone as in, by I don't think 12, 13 your kids will spend any time with you. So
Oh, my son's turning 14 next month.
but does he spend time with you?
Well, yeah, I guess.
Oh.
No, but I mean, it's not so much a question. Yeah, you're absolutely right, right? Like, I mean, they do develop into, I think, their own selves, like, mini adult selves by the time they're teenagers and stuff like that. But I guess it's,
But they also have their own world of friends and they want to go spend time with them. And
yeah,
hasn't
with
all
him,
that
it's more
started?
interests and stuff like that. But I think, yeah, I mean, to be honest, as a parent, I mean, the reason I asked you this question was because my mental model is that they're here with you till they're 17, then they're off. So when you said at 12 they're off, I was like, wait, what did I miss? Right? So
Yeah.
no, I think you have a lot of stuff to look forward to when they become teenagers. I mean,
I agree.
yeah.
But I think I think the reality dawned on me in the summers this year when so we spend our summers typically in Hyderabad, right? Parents are there, in-laws are there, and all that. And I travel in and out. And so this time he said, "Look, I don't want to go to Hyde," and he's very close to the grandparents. And he said, "Look, I don't want to go to Hyderabad. I have my friends here." So that is when it dawned to me saying, "Look, hey, I think it's not like you have as much time as you think you have." Right. So
Or perhaps, I mean, the transactional way to, or a simpler way to look at that would be that he's just saying that I want more interesting ways to spend my summer vacation, perhaps. Right? Not necessarily that, I mean, with all due respect to spending time with grandparents, I mean,
no, he has a gala time with grandparents. It's just that I think he's got to an age now where he finds
there is
friends to be
competition.
more
There is
interesting
competition,
to.
absolutely.
He is left to him. He'll go to Hyde for a weekend or anything like that, right? So yeah. So that the other thing, so 3 to 6 is with we've lunched together at least one meal, and then 6 to 10 is the US shift. So kind of broken it that way. But personal times is every weekend I try and do 3-4 hours of a longer vipassana sitting, and then once in a year you go for a full vipassana, and once in a year I'm trying to start serving a vipassana course. I did that last year, but yeah, I'm hoping I can make that a regular as well. So that's personal time for you. So probably 20 days plus a little bit more
right.
every week.
You read, what's a good book that you could recommend to us that you've read recently?
Interesting. I think from I chanced upon this book called, I'm guessing know Samir Guglani, Morpheus.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
Like
so
I think earlier
the
generations
OG.
of that's right.
Yeah, Samir. So Samir recommended this book called The Surrender Experiment. It's by a guy called Michael Singer.
Yes,
Have
I
you read
have
it?
it. I have it.
Yeah. So
I haven't started reading it. I bought it like second to after. There's another book also as well. Michael Singer's. I forget
it's
the
called
tip
The
of my tongue.
Untethered Soul.
That's right. The Untethered Soul.
I think The Surrender Experiment is the first read, and then you should read
Oh,
the.
is it? I'm reading it
Yeah,
the other way around then.
yeah. But so again, he's an entrepreneur, built a whatever, right? So large medical software play, and he basically writes a story of how he surrendered to life at like 22, 23, or 24, something like that, and how things happened in life, right? So because as an entrepreneur, at least me, I've always been this. I think till my first Vipassana happened, you're always very in need for control, right? A need for control on outcomes, a need for control on. So that was I call that as a bridge to spirituality type book. That was an interesting book to read.
Yeah, I think Michael Singer does a good job of, I think, bridging Eastern spirituality with, I think, the Western logic focused mindsets that a lot of us are more used to. So I think his book bridges that very well. You put it very well, actually.
Correct. So, that started me off on reading more on the spirituality side. I think off late I've been doing a lot of reading on the Buddha. I think it's Buddha and Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi actually didn't write much. Buddha, on the other hand, has tons of. So it's very interesting. I mean, this is of course probably not very relevant here, but like the Advaita piece and the Buddhism are slightly different but very similar, although they've been interpreted very, very differently. So I'm now reading a book on by this again Western by a guy called John Yates. What he's trying to do is he's trying to apply neuroscience on Buddhism, and basically the Buddha's teaching on how you should meditate. A very interesting book on because I've never seen anyone say, here is a
The
path
science
to
behind it.
here is a path to awakening. Right. So this one's one of those weird
All right.
attempts. So yeah.
Is there something that, like, other than Vipassana, of course, which you geek out on a lot, is there anything else that you've been, like, which is a hobby or a passion that you've been geeking out lately?
Yeah, the last 2 years have been very, very high on the spirituality side, right? So I've been keying out a fair bit on this Advaita versus Buddhism thing.
All right, that's fine. What's the most interesting vacation that you went to recently? Or whatever, like over the last few years.
Interesting. That's a good one. So Anant was my co-founder and at Capillary now. Both of us did the Grand Canyon rim to rim. This is I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's basically you go all the way into the canyon and then you climb up, right? So it's a 45-kilometer walk, and in that 45-kilometer walk, you lose 1.6 kilometers in altitude, and you gain 1.6 kilometers in altitude back. So that's 1.5 Burj Khalifas being gained and lost on the same day. We had definitely not. I mean, we've done 100-kilometer walks together, the Oxfam thing and stuff. But so this one was. We were told, do 2 hikes and you'll be prepared for it. It was very interesting. I thought it was again peeling a few layers off on yourselves, because the thing with most hikes is you climb first and then you head down, right? This one's you go down first and then you climb. And so the last, I'd say the last 15 kilometers, not even the last 15 kilometers, actually, the last 5 miles is when you climb one Burj Khalifa up. And I thought mentally for both of us, it was an aha that, you're almost on the crossroads of being a zombie or hallucinating, especially if you're not. There'll be people around who would be like, doing it like it's their morning walk, and then here you would be like totally like murdered on it. So I think that was a I'd say pushing the limits too far experience very recently with this mid-October, about 3 months ago.
That sounds fascinating. Is there a entrepreneur that are there entrepreneurs that you kind of look to or look up to when you think about building great businesses that last?
Great question, actually. I think obviously there's I like what the Infosys folks have done. At least the version till 2010, for sure, right? I think it's a incredible story of staying to the principles, taking the hard calls, a lot of that, right? So the Infosys founders for sure, right? So the other folks in the more contemporary generations, I think, are Naveen at Enmobi again, right? I mean, he's been at it. He's done the right things for just such a long time now. In the SaaS worlds, I think Sudhir at Zenoti, again, it's just second or third startup, so you see the maturity of running a marathon and not doing a sprint and some of that stuff. I think of the folks from the Indian side, I'd put these. Yeah.
You're a parent. What do you observe about the way your kids see the world versus what you did when you were their age?
I think upbringing has a big impact on kids, right? I think we as a generation were probably what I tend to call as the hungry generation. We were brought up with a lot of hunger, right? That you have to prove a point, you have to be successful in life, you have to. I don't know how you were brought up, but I thought most of us were kind of brought up that way, right? So I think this generation, I think we as parents are kind of wanting to bring them up to be happy, right? I mean, I don't know if that's
yes, absolutely.
So
yeah.
I'm sure our parents also wanted us to be happy, but their definition of happiness was hunger, achieve, and then you'll get to happy. I think our definition of happiness is a little bit different.
Job security led to happiness earlier. Now.
Exactly. Right. So I do see that play out a lot on the kids. Like I think and hence they're like, my son turned 10, right? So we went to a small trek in Coorg. And while we were climbing up, I asked him, look, so what do you want to do? Like just this, I mean, casual question on saying I thought he'll give me an answer of saying I want to be a scientist or that someone asked me that when I was a kid, I would have said scientist, right? So, and I was asked and I did give this answer when I was a kid, right? And he said, I want to be happy. So I was like, okay.
For a minute, you were taken aback.
For a while, actually. I was like, so I think our kids definitely see the world very differently from the way we saw it, right? And I also think this is a generation that probably will need to answer the question of purpose a lot earlier because they won't have that. Do you have enough money? Is your education going to be good? A lot of those questions that we probably grappled with when we were children, I don't think are going to be questions. I think are going to be questions these folks will take like for granted that ye sab to ho gayi, right? So I think the sooner you put them on the path of finding purpose, I think the more happy they would be. At least I feel even they are probably trying to answer that for themselves in some sense. Like my son does sit for 10-12 minutes once or twice a week with me when I sit down to meditate as well. So I think he's also probably that side of it a little bit. Yeah.
It was a lovely chat, Aneesh. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks so much for it.